Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Pleasure to be with you today. My name is Elizabeth, the Manager of Research and Consultation here at Grant's office. And today we will be discussing securing our communities, accessing the Canada Community Security Program for nonprofits. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items for you. First and foremost, if you are experiencing audio issues at any point in time, you can adjust your settings using the audio and video menu at the top left of your screen. So if you continue experiencing an audio issue, we recommend leaving the event and hopping back on, but sometimes that simple restart isn't enough to resolve the issue. So, if you do miss anything, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to review and download by close of business today. Now, this event will be presented in English. However, we do have captioning with real-time translation available. And to access this feature, just click on the little CC button on the lower left side of your screen. From there, you'll be able to select your preferred caption language. Also, feel free to ask questions you have throughout the event using the Q&A interface on the right side of your screen. If you don't see the Q&A interface there, just click on the three dots button down along the bottom of your screen and select the Q&A feature. We'll answer as many questions as time allows towards the end of our presentation. And you're also welcome to email us with any additional questions at education@grantsoffice.com. Finally, this session is being recorded and will be available to view and download by close of business today. Our amazing media coordinator, Kate, has dropped the link in the chat box for you now to where that recording will be housed. Towards the end of the event, that link will become our event resources page where the recording and slide deck will be available. We'll also send out that link via email tomorrow once all the resources are available. And now, on to our event. Like I said, my name is Elizabeth Evans. I am the Manager of Research and Consultation for our Canada and U.S. operations. And we are joined today by an amazing team member of mine, Siddhi. And Sid comes to us from Canada Direct. We're glad to have her. She's a grants development consultant here for our Canadian team, and she's going to be sharing a bunch of knowledge during today's presentation. And we do have a jam-packed session for you today, like I said, with lots of wonderful information. We're going to start out with a quick overview of what are hate crimes and are they on the rise in Canada, looking at some of that data. Then we're going to actually dig into what the Canada Community Security Program is, or CCSP as it's known. We talk about who is eligible as well as what expenses are eligible. And then towards the end, we'll cover how you can apply for these funds through your organization, examples of some previously funded projects, and then also give you a quick teaser about what provincial funding is also available. Like I said, there will be plenty of time for Q&A towards the end, so please do not be shy. Feel free to drop those questions into the chat box. But with that, enough from me. I would like to introduce you to Sid from our team to get things going. Take it away, Sid.
All right, perfect. So before we dive into the program itself, let's first explore some recent trends in hate crimes to better understand the broader landscape and the challenges Canadian communities are facing. So overall, hate crimes in Canada are on the rise, and the numbers are quite alarming. So looking at 2023 alone, the police reported about 4,800 hate-motivated incidents, which is a super sharp increase from the 3,600 incidents reported in 2022. And with the first half of 2024 already recording over 2,400 cases, the trend really shows no sign of slowing down. As we know, certain communities are disproportionately targeted by hate crimes in Canada, most notably racialized groups, religious minorities, but also LGBTQ community members who continue to face rising threats. So looking at the graph here, we see that most numbers have significantly increased over the 5-year span since 2019. Though some fluctuations do occur year to year, the overall trend remains concerning. highlighting the ongoing risks faced by marginalized communities across the country. It's important to note that these crimes don't just affect individuals, they also pose a major threat to nonprofit organizations such as cultural centers and places of worship. In 2022, about 13% of nonviolent hate crimes took place at businesses and community spaces. So as Canada continues to grow as a diverse society, it's essential to recognize the risks faced by vulnerable communities and the organizations that serve them and provide support. Fortunately, there are resources available to protect such nonprofit spaces, and one of the core resources available is the Canada Community Security Program, or the CCSP. And today I'll be breaking down how this program can help your organization strengthen its security needs to protect your communities. Perfect. So now that we have that background, let's jump right in. So what exactly is the Canada Community Security Program? Well, it's a federal initiative administered by Public Safety Canada, designed to offer time-limited funding and support to communities vulnerable to hate-motivated incidents and crimes. Now, don't worry too much about all of the info on the slide. We'll get into more detail throughout the presentation, but let's first focus on the program's 3 core objectives. Now, the first one being a reduction and mitigation of the harm caused by incidents of hate-motivated crime in targeted areas. The second aim ensures that targeted communities are equipped to address the risk of hate-motivated crime at their community gathering spaces. And lastly, the last goal is an increased awareness of the particular challenges faced by communities at risk of hate-motivated crimes. But to really understand the program objectives, we must first define what exactly a hate-motivated crime is. And the CCSP has provided a definition. So they define it as an unlawful activity committed to cause damage, harm, fear, intimidation, or threaten the security and property of an identifiable individual or group. However, in this case, the motivation for the crime is based solely or in part on factors such as race or religion, nationality, ethnic origin, sexual orientation, etc. So for a shortened version of the definition, it's basically a crime meant to harm or intimidate someone, but the motive is based on bias in respect to broader identities. Note that hate crimes are not only risk-based though. Hate-motivated incidents are activities with the same harmful intent, but that don't exactly meet the threshold of a criminal offense. I also wanted to note that while this program is new, so it was released by Public Safety Canada in October 2024, the program is essentially a rebrand of the older Security Infrastructure Program, or SIP, which you may already be familiar with. So it ran from 2007 to 2024. And as we've explored with the rise in hate-motivated incidents across the country, Public Safety Canada really aimed to strengthen and expand the program's capacity to better support at-risk communities. So the CCSP maintains its core mission, but expanded a variety of factors, which I've listed below. Importantly, the CCSP offers a wider range of eligible applicants, so now including office spaces and cemeteries. There are also more activities covered by the CCSP than the previous SIP program. It's also worth mentioning that Public Safety Canada removed some administrative barriers, so there are less documents required to apply. They also increased funding support, so from 50% to now 70% of project costs that can be reimbursed by the program. And lastly, the stacking limit of total government assistance across federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal sources has been removed. So this opens up more opportunities for organizations to apply for other sources of funding on top of the CCSP funds. So just to clarify this point, you can now stack any government grant, whether you got it from Public Safety Canada or not, on top of the funding received through the CCSP. So we'll dive into the specifics later, but overall we see that the new program covers a wider scope and is more accessible than the previous SIP program. So if this is a program of interest to you, you caught it at a right time. Perfect. So let's take a quick look at how exactly the program works. So funding is transferred to the recipient through one of two ways, either through a grant or a contribution. So the CCSP is currently delivered via contributions. So this just means that funding is generally provided as a reimbursement upon project completion if all payment requirements are met. However, the CCSP has outlined on their website that grants will be available for this year, 2025. So please stay tuned for that if you're interested in receiving the funds up front. Perfect. So who exactly is eligible to receive these funds? Well, if for your organization to qualify for CCSP funding, you have to be a private, non-for-profit organization. So I've listed a couple of examples on the slide, but some of the most commonly funded entities amongst these groups include educational institutions, shelters serving victims of gender-based violence, places of worship, community centers, etc. So these eligible entities represent an extended list from the previous SIP fund. Now, I just want to really emphasize that this is a minimum eligibility requirement. If you want your organization to be eligible for priority assessment and move up to the top of Public Safety Canada's radar, your organization must have had an incident that is severe enough to qualify. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, to measure how severe incidents classify, the CCSP has created what's known as the severity threshold for organizations that can receive priority funding. So here are the conditions. The first one is that your organization has been the victim of any of the following. It could be a severe incident related to a hate crime resulting in bodily harm, injury, death, or a significant threat of physical violence. So an example of this would be the presence of an armed intruder. It could be significant property destruction that took place at your physical location, or significant destruction or desecration of religious artifacts and symbols. It could also simply be hate-motivated graffiti that includes messaging that threatens violence towards the members of your community. Now, the second condition is that the hate-motivated incident is within the prescribed radius of an eligible severe incident based on what's known as the proximity clause. So this just means that if your organization is within a certain proximity from another organization that was impacted by a hate-motivated incident, you may also qualify for priority assessment. The third condition is that the severe incident occurred within the last 2 months. It was reported to the police and involved a police response. A police report was filed. And lastly, the severe incident must have had demonstrated links to a hate-motivated crime, terrorism, or extremist factions. So 5 of these conditions must be met to be considered for priority assessment. However, other criteria may be determined and reviewed on a case-by-case basis, but you really want to make sure you're hitting at least 5 of these criteria. Great. So now that we know who's covered, let's jump right into funding details. So I'll start by highlighting the eligible and ineligible expenses, and then I'll cover how much funding you might actually be able to secure. Now, in terms of eligible expenses, these include a wide range of security enhancements. So it could be the installation of security equipment and hardware. So here we're talking anything from cameras, alarm systems, to access control systems. It could be any minor renovations to improve security infrastructure, the development of security and emergency assessments and plans. So this could be a threat and vulnerability assessment, an incident response plan, or an emergency response plan. So relatedly, eligible expenses also include the provision of training related to security measures, as well as engagement of time-limited security personnel. Now, this was not offered with the previous SIP program, so it's a new eligible expense under the CCSP. Keep in mind that the security personnel are only eligible for up to 3 months to enhance security when there's an increased level of risk. So for example, during religious holidays or ceremonies, immediately after a severe hate-motivated incident occurred on premise, on anniversaries of previous attacks, or during protests or demonstrations at the site. Again, keep in mind that security personnel or paid duty police officers are not intended to cover routine security needs, nor core or ongoing operating expenses. Now, this brings us to ineligible expenses. These include capital costs. So, for example, you can't lease or buy land or buildings using the funds. Costs outside the funding agreement. So this relates to any items or service that falls outside the approved budget, or expenses incurred before or after the funding period, or just generally any costs that don't align with the program's guidelines. Additionally, the program does not cover travel expenses or professional and consulting fees. It's also crucial to note that core or ongoing operated expenses related to the project, including maintenance, are not eligible for reimbursement under this program. So if your project mainly involved maintaining operations, this really isn't the best program for your needs. Great, so now we're ready to break down individual award information. So zooming out and looking at the big picture, Public Safety Canada allocated around $16 million for the 2-year period between 2024 and 2026. The previous Security Infrastructure Program allocated about $5 million annually, so we see that the funding pool has expanded. If your project gets approved for funding, you're entitled to a maximum of 70% of total eligible project costs covered by the CCSP. So these include the expenses we listed above. In terms of dollar amounts, the maximum Public Safety Canada contribution is of $1.5 million per project. Now, I just want to note that most projects who have received funding requested a significantly lower amount. The program hasn't really made any award higher than $500,000 yet. So if you have a super large project planned, keep in mind that the funds aren't typically used for this. I also just wanted to emphasize, as I previously mentioned, with the removal of the stacking limit, federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal contributions can now cover up to 100% of project costs. So whatever the CCSP will not cover, you can find alternative forms of government funding to stack on top of that. Great, so now we can move on to application details, starting with timeline information. So the program is delivered through a multi-phase process. Now, the first step is obviously submitting your application. There's no specific deadline as the process is ongoing. However, CCSP applications are accepted on a first-come, first-served basis, with priority given to funding those able to establish the greatest need. So those meeting 5 of the priority assessment criteria we covered before. So you definitely want to apply as soon as possible to secure funding before it runs out. The second step is the application assessment. Now, this can take up to a month as Public Safety Canada assesses applications for eligibility, but evidently higher volumes of applications may extend this timeframe. We then move on to project development, which can take up to a month. This is for those deemed eligible to begin developing their project, addressing any issues identified during the assessment phase. Now, it's important to note that being eligible does not guarantee funding just yet. After this, we move to project approval. This can take 1 to 2 months. So this is where fully developed projects are sent for final review. And once your project gets approved, an agreement is signed by all parties. After this, you're all set to start your project, which you have around a year to complete. 1 to 3 months later, you can submit payment deliverables to Public Safety Canada for processing and payment. So we see here that this is quite a lengthy process. You're looking at around a 4-month wait time just to have your project approved. So because of this, again, if you have your project idea ready, you want to start working on your application ASAP. So what exactly makes a good application? Well, while planning your project, you want to keep 5 important things in mind. The first thing you want to consider is to ensure that the core of your application will be outlining how your proposed project will meet your site's security needs in relation to the threat of hate-motivated incidents or crimes. Therefore, understanding the vulnerabilities at your project site is really crucial to improve your facility's safety and security. Now, a great way to do this that the CCSP highly encourages, while it's not mandatory, is to obtain a professional security assessment. They've listed a few examples on their website, so please consult that for more information. And note that these are offered free by local police services or for a cost through a private security firm. Just another note, if you choose the latter route and apply for funding for a security assessment from a security firm, the assessment can only be conducted once a funding agreement is signed with Public Safety Canada. You can then list the security assessment as part of your project activities. Now, once your assessment is completed, you may submit a copy to Public Safety Canada and request adjustments to your project to meet the report's recommendation. Now, just to clarify, this info isn't relevant if you choose to get a security assessment done from your local police force. This is just if you get it done through a security firm. Now, again, I really want you to consider getting a security assessment done, since it's a great way to verify your needs and ensure your project is relevant and realistic. Now, once you have these needs verified, you will want to set security objectives. Make sure to prioritize the most significant risks to be addressed based on the vulnerabilities identified in your site. Then, after this, you can nail down the specific objectives of your proposed security enhancements. So whether that be improving surveillance, enhancing access controls, etc. From there, you can work on developing a project timeline. So create a schedule setting realistic timelines for each phase of the project, including equipment purchase, installation, testing, or staff training on responding to hate-motivated events. After that, the last step will be sourcing and selecting your vendors for your required equipment. Keep in mind that you must submit detailed quotes from selected vendors as part of your application, so it's really recommended you seek out multiple quotes from different companies for comparison to ensure fair pricing and scope. If the price seems excessive to you, it probably is. Projects are not limited to only one vendor because they're often multifaceted, so don't worry about that. And please note that the CCSP cannot endorse or recommend private vendors for your project. So to make sure you're making the right decision, seek out quotes with comparable project activities to ensure fair prices and the most appropriate vendor for the project. Great. Now, in terms of more general application tips, you want to make sure your project is SMART. And no, I don't just mean intelligent. You've probably heard this acronym before, but let's just do a quick lightning round refresher. So the S stands for specific. Clearly define your project. Instead of saying, we need funding for security, you want to specify. For example, we aim to install 10 high-resolution security cameras in and around our facility to monitor entrances and deter hate-motivated incidents. The next letter, M, stands for measurable. You want to make sure to show how you're going to track success. Will your project reduce incidents? Is your project going to increase community engagement? Or will it use data to support your goals? For example, our goal is to decrease security incidents by 30% over the next year by doing XYZ. The next letter is A, or achievable. You want to make sure you're realistic. Funders want to see a project that can be executed effectively. If you request funding for training, you want to make sure you have the right people and time to carry it out. So, for example, if your proposed training session takes 3 months to complete, you obviously don't want to write on your application that they'll be completed in the span of 2 weeks. The next letter is R, or relevant. This is not a grant for general security initiatives. This is a grant specific to security projects related to hate-motivated crimes and incidents. So before applying, take a moment to revisit the 3 key objectives we covered earlier and really make sure your project aligns with those, as funders will be looking for a clear connection. The next letter is T, which is time-bound, and of course provide a clear timeline. Funders need to know when and how your project will be completed, with dates as specific as you can provide. It's really by following the SMART approach that your grant application becomes clearer, stronger, and simply more compelling to funders. I know this seems super intuitive or just like basic common sense, but take the time to do this as a well-prepared application brings you one step closer to securing the funding your organization needs. Great, so all that's left to do is to apply to the program. Again, applications can be submitted at any time through a continuous intake process. Only online applications through the CCSP website are accepted, so you can't mail your applications. So if you're an eligible organization with a relevant project, all that's left to do is to obtain the necessary documents required to apply. So I've highlighted the two mandatory documents you will need, the first one being quote information. So this would include information such as an itemized list of the equipment you purchased, including the product name or model, the cost per unit and the number of units, or labor and installation costs, outlining how many technicians were required to set up the equipment and how many hours it took. Or if you're conducting any training or hire any security personnel, these also need to be included in the quotes. And please make sure to note down the number of hours each person worked. You're also going to need a detailed budget. I just want to emphasize that the CCSP has provided a template for each one of these documents, so please refer to these before submitting your own. A QR code to the website will be provided at the end of the presentation, so don't worry about having to find the website or program guidelines on your own. But for a successful application, I highly encourage you to submit more than just these two documents. You can also add supporting documentation. So for example, media articles that demonstrate your organization is at risk of hate-motivated crimes. If you are a private educational institution, it's mandatory that you include documentation that confirms that your organization is recognized by the province or territory in which you operate. You may also want to include your security assessment. This is mandatory for applications including landscaping as a project activity. And for that, the security assessment has to be a crime prevention through environmental design. Again, all of this information is provided on the CCSP website, which I will share at the end of the presentation. This is really important if you're applying for priority assessment. Please send a copy of the police report regarding the severe incident. If you're not able to obtain one, don't worry. You can also submit a letter of support from your local police service. You can also choose to include media articles about the severe incident as well. Now, once you've checked your eligibility and have all the documentation required, the application should take about an hour to complete, so it's not that long. Now, the CCSP has outlined some common mistakes applicants should watch out for to avoid delays with their project. So you can help prevent delays by avoiding inconsistencies in terms of the type, cost, and quantity of equipment and services across your provided documentation. So you want to make sure to double check everything is there before submitting your quotes and budget. You also want to avoid an inadequately detailed breakdown of expenses in your quotes or budget, particularly for labor expenses. So this is most relevant if training is required for your project. So make sure to properly plan for who will lead the ladder or if hiring security personnel will be required at some point of your project. Also look out for ineligible expenses and insufficient detail related to the expense, which would require further explanation. So make sure you justify why you're spending the money for all the items you include in your quotes. Additionally, you want to avoid inappropriate placement of equipment, which raises privacy concerns. So, for example, you obviously don't want to set up cameras in bathrooms. And the last thing you want to avoid is over-sophisticated security equipment, excessive quantities, and excessive pricing. So be realistic with what you actually need the equipment for and how much it should cost. Now, before we wrap up the webinar, I wanted to explore some examples of previously funded projects. So I've provided an example of a small, medium, and large size project so we can see in what ways they vary. Keep in mind that all publicly disclosed funding is under the previous Security Infrastructure Program as the CCSP program is still new. So examples of projects I will include were all funded by SIP, but since the CCSP program is simply an evolved version of SIP and it has the same core purpose, we can definitely expect the same types of projects to receive funding here on out. So the first project we're going to explore is for the Church of God of Prophecy, a very small organization located in Montreal. Their main need was a CCTV security system, including cameras and accessories to enhance safety and monitoring. But along with that, they also required training on how to properly use the new equipment. So for this, they had a budget of under $10,000. Given their size, the goal was to provide a solid security setup that's both effective and easy to manage. Now, if we're moving up to a medium-sized project, let's take a look at the Metropolitan United Church, which is located in Toronto. So they received about $23,000 from the program. Now, this case is a bit particular, so for some background information, basically this institution was targeted in March 2024 by an act of vandalism that the Toronto police have designated a hate-motivated incident. So investigators were involved, as anti-Semitic and homophobic graffiti was spray painted at their physical location. Now, this means that they definitely qualified for priority assessment. They applied right after the incident, so within that 2-month period we discussed, which would explain why an agreement was signed by June 2024. So it's a really quick process when you qualify for priority assessment. Their overall activities included conducting a security assessment and the purchase and installation of a CCTV camera and accessory, as well as upgraded locks. So for this, again, they received $23,600. Most of your projects will likely follow a similar scope, focusing on diversified but straightforward security upgrades. So nothing overly complex, but really essential for enhancing safety. Now, an example of a very large project is the Toldos Yaakov Yosef Foundation, located in Montreal. So this is the largest project funded by the program up to date. The foundation received over $500,000 last year, and they used this money for quite a lot of things. So they got a security assessment done. Again, a great way to verify your needs on premise. They had a CCTV system installed to monitor and deter threats, a card access system controlling who enters the building for added security, an intercom system improving communication at entry points, an intrusion system detecting and responding to unauthorized access. They also got new doors and windows with locking mechanisms, again reinforcing entry points, as well as really simple things such as window films and fencing. Importantly, they also used the money for evacuation training. Now, this is a really large scope of project activities, so please feel free to use this list to give you examples and ideas of expenses you might want to include in your application. Now, for some context, they were not the target of any severe incident. However, Public Safety Canada issued a press release stating that a large amount in federal funding was allocated to their congregation as well as another in the Montreal area. According to Public Safety Canada, this funding is meant to help these synagogues strengthen their security infrastructure, ensuring they can continue fostering and supporting the practice and study of the Jewish faith in the city. Now, this project really shows that you don't have to go through a severe incident and qualify for priority assessment to see the need for a larger project. It's about planning ahead and being proactive. You can always focus on the bigger picture, not just your immediate security needs when you're planning your project. Great. So let's shift gears and take a look at the broad trends in funding to give you a little idea of the main characteristics of most funded projects. So when looking at the types of nonprofit organizations that have received funding, a clear trend emerges. It's definitely religious nonprofit organizations that are the primary applicants and awardees, as seen in the 3 examples I just gave you. Also, places of worship tend to receive priority funding as they're often directly targeted by severe hate-motivated incidents. The United Church Project is a good example of this. On the other hand, looking through the list of funded projects, those that pertain to educational institutions and office spaces were not as common. While some schools and community organizations have received funding, they definitely make up a smaller portion of the overall applicants and awardees. Now, in terms of the average award size, it usually ranges between $20,000 to $100,000, which makes sense as most applications concern mid-sized projects like the United Church project we explored, requiring things such as security assessments and CCTV security systems. Very few projects exceed $100,000. So it's very uncommon to have these huge, large-scale security enhancement projects, since all the security enhancements should only be relevant for protection against hate-motivated crimes specifically. Again, not just for general security needs. But this was pretty interesting. Small-scale projects under $10,000 were also pretty rare, meaning that organizations typically apply to the CCSP for comprehensive upgrades rather than tiny little fixes. Now, in terms of the most popular project types, it's definitely physical security enhancements that dominate the funding landscape. So these include security cameras, access control systems, fencing, and reinforced entry points. On the other hand, emergency preparedness and response training was a less popular project type. Most projects that included training had it as an add-on to a larger physical infrastructure, physical security investment, rather than being the core of their project. Now, in terms of the most commonly funded expense, by far, CCTV security systems have been the most popular expense over the years, which makes sense since they provide continuous surveillance, which helps deter hate crimes, but they also assist the police in identifying perpetrators. Nearly every funded project includes some form of CCTV installation or upgrade. So it's definitely a key feature of a successful application. All right, so we've talked about the Canada Community Security Program. Now, this is a big national program that's funded more than 600 projects. But here's the thing. Because it's so big, it's also pretty competitive. So we can expect they've received thousands of applications from all over the country throughout the years, especially since hate crimes have been on the rise these last 5 years. And unfortunately, not everybody gets approved. And even if you do, there's really no guarantee you'll get the full amount you asked for. Now, if you're looking for an option with a better shot at securing funding, here's something to consider. Provincial grants. These programs work similarly to the CCSP, but since they're on a smaller regional scale, they're less competitive, which also means there's a higher chance of approval. So instead of putting all your eggs in the CCSP basket, considering provincial equivalents could be a smart move to boost your chances of getting the security funding you need. Notably, if your organization is located in Ontario, there's the Ontario Anti-Hate Security and Prevention Grant. This initiative provides one-time grants ranging from $5,000 to $10,000 to eligible organizations. So this is anyone from faith-based, cultural, LGBTQ+, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. And similarly to the CCSP, the funding aims to support these groups in implementing measures to prevent and address hate incidents. If you're located in British Columbia, there's the Anti-Hate Community Support Fund. Again, just like the CCSP, this fund supports identifiable groups that have experienced or are at risk of experiencing hate-motivated crimes or incidents, but for the BC region specifically. It assists organizations such as places of worship or cultural community centers in repairing damages or enhancing security measures. So be sure to check out the respective provincial websites for more details on eligibility and application requirements if it's of interest to you. And the bonus here is that since there's no stacking limit, you're free to apply to these programs on top of the CCSP, and they can serve as a great additional funding avenue. Perfect. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention is that there's a detailed application guide on the CCSP website you should definitely consult before and during your application preparation efforts. So all relevant info is on the website, and they also provide answers to frequently asked questions. Now, one quick frequently asked question I wanted to address is a question they often receive from past Security Infrastructure Program recipients who ask if they can receive funding under the new CCSP program. And their answer is that yes, applicants that applied under the last SIP call for applications are eligible to apply for the new CCSP. However, they're not able to apply for the same activities that they were previously funded through a funding agreement. So you don't get any special consideration if you received SIP funding in the past. You have to submit a new project and a new application. Now, organizations who currently have an application under the SIP program will be contacted by Public Safety Canada to discuss the status of the application and their option to continue under the CCSP. So if this is relevant to you, you can expect the program to contact you personally. Now, if you experience any unforeseen technical difficulties as you complete your application, please contact the email which I've listed on the slide. The organization also offers online information sessions in both official languages. So these information sessions present a great opportunity to learn more about the program, the application process, and to ask any additional questions to program officials directly. So if you want to be notified for when the information sessions are held, you can subscribe to their mailing list through the website. All right, so that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Canada Community Security Program. We've covered who's eligible, how much funding you can get, what costs are covered, and some key strategies to strengthen your application, while also exploring some past projects. Hopefully, this gives you a solid foundation to navigate the process with confidence and maximize your chances of securing funding. But of course, every project is unique, and you might have some specific questions about how the CCSP applies to your personal situation. So let's open it up for a Q&A session. Feel free to ask about anything that came up during the presentation or anything else that's on your mind that I didn't get a chance to cover yet. And with that, I'll pass it over to Elizabeth to kick things off.
Sorry about that, folks. I was muted. All right. Thank you so much, Sid, for sharing your knowledge of the CCSP program. And we do have a few minutes now to answer some of your questions. And I see we have quite a few in the chat. So the first question for you, Sid, is, are Pride events covered by the CCSP?
So unfortunately, Pride events are not covered by the CCSP. If your organization wants to apply for funding for a Pride event, they can go to Fierté Canada Pride, but CCSP does not fund any Pride initiatives, unfortunately.
All right, thank you, Sid. And another one for you. This person is asking if they have the ability to submit more than one application. They don't expand on that, so I'm not sure if they have multiple sites under one organization, or maybe they just want to do multiple applications for the same site. But can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so you can definitely submit more than one application as long as each application is for a separate project. So you can't submit two applications if they pertain to the exact same project. But yeah, you're definitely encouraged to apply to multiple opportunities if you have different initiatives in mind. If you got rejected in the past and you want to apply again, you can choose to reapply with the same project, but obviously tweak your application, expand on your project, because you're not going to get the funding if you send in the same application again.
Great, thank you, Sid. And another one for you. I accidentally included a typo in my application and only caught it after hitting submit. Am I able to edit my application still?
So there's unfortunately no way to directly edit your application if you already submitted it by yourself, but you can always contact that email that I provided before for assistance, and they can help you out with any edits or tweaks you want to make to your application.
Great, thank you, Sid. And that's actually a wonderful segue to another question we got that I'll take answering. And this individual wanted to know if there were any services available to support their efforts in going after this program. Now, Sid, you mentioned, of course, that folks can reach out to the funder themselves, but I do want to highlight that Grants Office is a full-service grants consulting and proposal development firm. So whether that means grant readiness coaching, funder prospecting to help you identify the appropriate grants, or even just getting your ducks in a row to apply to a target grant opportunity, we are here to help. And of course, that does include editing and review of your proposals if you're going to be drafting it yourself. So we can help you avoid those pesky little typos that you might miss, or even take the thoughts out of your head and put it on page for you by bringing in one of our experienced grant writers to help you articulate your project vision. So yes, there are services to help you prepare for the CCSP program if you desire. Just get in touch with Grants Office and we can talk through what is available. All right, Sid, we have just a couple more questions for you here. First one being, can you say a little more about that cost share element? Maybe I missed it, but where is that 30% of funding supposed to come from?
Right, so if you get approved for funding, 70% of your project costs will be covered by the CCSP. Now, that remaining 30% can be covered by your own organization, or you can get the funding through another grant source. So for example, the provincial equivalents I gave you, or any other federal grant source as well. So you can really secure that funding from anywhere. There's no limit in how much federal funding you can receive to fund your project.
Amazing. Thank you, Sid. And our last question here from our attendees is a two-parter, and I'm going to give you the first part first, which is there an incentive to submitting our application ASAP, or could we wait until the fall to submit?
You definitely want to apply as soon as possible. Because it's first come, first served, they're not going to wait until they process applications. So somebody else is going to apply in the meantime. So you definitely, if you have your project ready, you definitely want to apply as soon as possible.
Okay, and then part two to their question, is it possible to read funded projects from 2024 for inspiration? So I'm assuming they mean by read funded projects, they're talking about, is it possible to see the narratives or other application material?
Yes, so you can consult on the previous SIP website. They have an entire list of all of the projects they funded up to date. Unfortunately, the CCSP has not made that information public as of now, but the old SIP program has all of that information available online for free. So you can look at all of the different projects that were funded, what types of equipment they got, what types of organization they were, and how much they received. So all of that is publicly disclosed.
Great. Thank you so much, Sid. And it looks like that's the last question we have. Nothing else has come in from the chat. So before we wrap, I just want to remind everybody that this session was recorded. It will be available for replay by close of business today. And our amazing media coordinator, Kate, is going to drop that link into the chat box again, so you have it available. And also know that the slides are already available at that URL right now. So we answered all the questions we had received, but if you didn't get something answered because it didn't come to you until 15 minutes from now or later tonight, please don't hesitate to email us. You can reach out to education@grantsoffice.com and someone will be in touch with that answer. Again, I want to thank Sid for sharing her expertise today. And like I said earlier, today's session has been recorded, and this recording, as well as the slides, are going to be available on the events resources page later today. So if you missed anything, want to share this event with a colleague, or even want to come back to it later for a refresher on something that we covered, you can always go to that website and review today's content at your convenience. We hope you found today's event to be a valuable use of your time, and we look forward to seeing you on a future Grants Cast. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.